This is outgoing Congresswoman Mary Peltola, an oddly unique electable Alaska Democrat. Yes, I said Democrat, who managed to win a statewide election in Alaska, dominion of Sarah Palin herself, which is very ironic, but we'll get to that later. Born Mary Sattler in Anchorage, Alaska on August 31st, 1973, later married her husband, Buzzy Peltola, also an Alaska native. She is what is known as a Yupik, which is an indigenous group of the western and southwestern parts of her state. Her Yupik name is Alak, which translates to the one who ruled in the English language. Mary was raised in communities across southwest Alaska, and as a young child, she traveled around Alaska with her father, Ward, to campaign, canvass, and get out the vote for Republican Don Young, someone who she would actually grow up to later succeed after 50 years of serving as Alaska's at-large United States House of Representatives of the whole state. She first studied elementary education at the University of Northern Colorado from 1991 to 1993, and later took courses at various universities across Alaska from 1994 to 1998. While she was a college student, she worked as a hearing and salmon technician for a statewide department that aims to protect, maintain, and improve the fish, game, and aquatic plant resources in the state, while managing their use and development in the best interests of the economy and well-being of the state. Yeah, she definitely knows how to gut a fish. In 1995, she won a tribal pageant by performing some of her cultural dances and wearing many of the accessories that defines her lifestyle. A year later, in 1996, she would finally assemble her political occupation, who soon became an intern for the Alaska legislature and ran for a seat in her region, losing to the incumbent who was named Ivan. Yes, his name was really first name Ivan and last name also Ivan, by just a vote total of 56 raw votes. She then campaigned for Mr. Ivan's opponent, who was an independent in the general election. She then worked as a reporter. How long and starting when, I could not find any details on that. Peltola, 2 years later, actually in 1998, ran for the same seat and made a comeback, defeating Ivan in a rematch contest, becoming a member of the Alaska House of Representatives, which is essentially like the U.S. House of Representatives for individual states. Ivan never seems to go away, apparently. He still tried to make a comeback, a similar comeback as Mary Peltola did in 2002 against her, but just narrowly lost. She sort of just came out of nowhere and just seemed to resonate and embody the values of the biggest state in the nation, and her small community especially. After being elected to plenty other positions in her state throughout the 21st century, she then eventually ran for her first statewide office, United States House of Representatives of Alaska, after longtime Representative Don Young had passed away while on a flight returning back to Alaska from Congress. This left the seat vacant, meaning that there would have to be a special, spontaneous election before Election Day, which ended up being held in August. In Alaska, there is what is called a blanket primary, where 48 people ran for this open seat, and the top 4 winners would go on to advance to the general election. Alaska also has a system called ranked choice voting, which voters enacted in 2020, which basically means when you go to vote in Alaska, you actually rank your candidates based on the order and preference of who you want to win or who you would prefer to win. So just for an ad-libbed example, if the candidate you voted for comes in 4th place, which is last place, then all of your votes for that 4th place candidate would go to your second ranked choice. And if your second ranked choice is the candidate who came in 3rd, which would be last in that round of voting, all of your votes for that candidate would be redirected to your 3rd and final option. That way, people who didn't vote for either of the top 2 finalized candidates get to actually have a say on who they would prefer of those 2 top candidates. Former governor and 2008 vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin threw her hat in the ring and made sure to lick every dimension of Trump's asshole to get his endorsement, like every other Republican in the country. She soon secured his endorsement, probably just because he wanted to give back to her for being among the first to endorse him during his 2016 presidential campaign.
You ready for a commander-in-chief who will let our warriors do their job and go kick ISIS ass? Are you ready to stump for Trump? I'm here to support the next president of the United States, Donald Trump.
And of course, like it always does, after receiving his endorsement, she solidified a lot of Trump-based voters. The top 4 advanced candidates ended up being Republican Sarah Palin, another Republican, Nick Begich III, independent candidate who also ran for senator in 2020 but was unsuccessful, Al Gross, and Democrat Mary Peltola. Al Gross departed his campaign and endorsed Peltola, meaning that there were now only 3 candidates and therefore would only be 2 voting rounds. It was soundly assumed that regardless of the Republican vote being split between 2 candidates, that a Republican would easily walk away with the seat in the back, whether it be Palin or Begich. About 40% of voters ranked Mary Peltola as their first choice. Almost 31% picked Sarah Palin as their top choice, and almost 28% chose Nick Begich as their first option. More voters chose either Peltola or Palin as their top picked, so they advanced to the second round of voting, and Begich was instantly eliminated. This means that the 28% of the electorate, otherwise known as the composition of voters that put Begich first, would have their votes transferred over to their second choice, calculating the final total and therefore the results of Peltola and Palin. Peltola got nearly 18% additional voters, while Peltola got almost 12% of the voters who ranked Begich first. But still, Palin's total ended up only being 48.5%, while Peltola's total was 51.5%. The biggest incomprehensible upset in Alaska politics has just happened. A local, relatively unheard of, ordinary Alaskan has just defeated a former governor and Republican vice presidential candidate of the same state. Peltola never even ran in a statewide race before, but Palin had. This immediately stunned millions across the country, seeing how Sarah Palin, one of the most popular governors in the country at the time, lost an attempt to make a return to politics, despite having the endorsement of Donald Trump, who won the state by 10% just 2 years before, and 14% in 2016. This marked the first time a Democrat carried the seat since 1972, and the first time a Democrat won the state in any race at all since 2008.
Peltola with 91,206 votes, and Sarah Palin with 85,902 votes.
Wow. I feel like I need to catch my breath for a minute. Very good news. I'm very happy. And I'm just extremely grateful to the Alaskan voters who put their faith in me. And just need to take a breath, I think. Yes.
You become the first Alaska Native to represent Alaska in DC. Tell me what your thoughts about that.
Well, yeah, I will have that distinction, but I think what's most important is that I'm an Alaskan and being sent to represent all Alaskans. And yes, being Alaska Native is part of my ethnicity, but I'm much more than my ethnicity, and I'll be looking forward to working forward for all Alaskans here in this short seat, and really focused on November and winning the 2-year seat as well, and looking forward to continuing out on the campaign trail and listening to what Alaskans want. We need to get our constituent services back on track. I need to make sure that I'm reaching out to the other delegates, our other federal delegates, Senator Lisa Murkowski and Senator Dan Sullivan, and reaching out to future colleagues. So I'm just really excited and very grateful.
Was there a time where this seemed sort of insurmountable? It seemed like this candidacy seemed like an enormous hill to climb. Tell me about the journey.
Sure. Well, in a field of 48, it's easy to feel lost in the shuffle. Yes, there were it's a new feeling having a lot of microphones and a lot of media attention. There were many months of having interviews and then finding out that there were 2 sentences about me and it was really a story about Santa Claus. So of course there have been many, many days and moments where it's felt insurmountable, of course.
What are your first priorities when you get to DC?
To work for Alaskans, to build partnerships, to build coalitions that we need going forward. Alaska is facing some serious challenges in terms of inflation, in terms of very, very high energy prices. And this is these are national challenges. I'm looking forward to meeting more colleagues and just really buckling down and getting to work.
She became the first Alaska native to be a member of Congress. Soon, she proceeded to the November election that was held concurrently with all the other midterm elections throughout the entire country. It was the same matchup between the same 3 candidates. The vote between Sarah Palin and Nick Begich was split again, with Palin once more eking out a higher first choice tabulation than Begich, therefore eliminating him again. But this time, Mary Peltola got 55% of the votes in the final round, compared to Sarah Palin's 45%. This was a historic landslide victory for a Democrat in Alaska. Unlike almost all politicians, Peltola was able to appeal to voters by being concerned with very, very local and unheard of issues as opposed to the issues in the entire country, like preserving fisheries and bringing some of the money spent in Washington, D.C. to Alaska to support fishermen, and drilling for copious amounts of oil, generating billions in revenue to boost job creation and opportunity in Alaska, ending bycatch, and even running brilliant ads like this.
For years, bottom trawlers have decimated our fisheries and Russian trawlers have undercut the price of Alaska catch. I'm Mary Peltola. Over the last 2 years, I've made fish a national issue. We've secured a ban on Russian trawling to reduce bycatch and preserve our fisheries. I wrote legislation to restrict bottom trawling in Alaska waters and to protect Bristol Bay. We've brought home more than $500 million for Alaska fisheries and fishermen. I approve this message because I know together we can save our fisheries and protect our way of life.
She also became the first Democrat in the entire election cycle to be endorsed by the NRA and served on the Blue Dog Democrat Coalition, which is a group of conservative-leaning Democrats who emphasized fiscal responsibility and reducing spending as their top priorities. She went on to continue being a real voice for Alaska in the House of Representatives, and constantly ranked, as little known as she was, as the most popular sitting Alaska politician. Roughly a year after she was reelected in the November general election, her husband and partner, Buzzy Peltola, tragically died in a plane crash while commuting hundreds of pounds of moose meat. In 2024, 2 years later, she would go on to be on her first ballot that coincided with a presidential election. This means it was going to be tough. Unlike the first 2 times, Sarah Palin decided not to run again, as she was said to spoil the election the last time because the same Republicans who would vote for Nick Begich would not vote for Sarah Palin, presumably because she is an out-of-touch, crazed nutjob.
Well, and then funny, haha, not funny.
Nick Begich, of course, did run again and was widely expected to unseat Peltola. Unfortunately, in the end, after the final round of votes were cast and counted, after the final round of ranked choice voting, Mary Peltola lost re-election after just 2 years in the House. No one said anything was going to be easy. Begich flipped the seat back to its traditional red and Republican-dominated state status. His win was contributed to the win for Republicans at the top of the ticket, where Alaska voted Republican for president since 1964, and they continued that trend by unsurprisingly voting for Donald Trump by 13 points, which that is actually pretty bad for a Republican on the presidential level in Alaska. I mean, ultimately, Trump did worse than he did in the state in 2016. He did worse than Romney did in 2012, John McCain with Sarah Palin on the ballot in 2008, Bush Jr. twice, and even Bob Dole did better in the 1996 presidential election than Trump did in 2024. But Nick Buttigieg's victory was even smaller, winning by less than 3 percentage points. Well, it was nice while it lasted having a freaking Democratic representative in Alaska, but good things always have to come to an end eventually. And even though she was narrowly ousted, she has, in fact, already filed paperwork to run again in the 2026 midterm elections for the same seat. And I think she has a real potential. She created a name for herself over just the last couple of years. And unlike before, the first 2 times she ran for this office, she had never previously won a statewide office before, ever. Now she has twice, insinuating that she can in fact win again in Ruby Red, Alaska. Mary Peltola will go on to continue being a trailblazing, underestimated, likable figure in American politics for years or decades to come.